Good afternoon, everybody. Yesterday, when I was reporting, this story was just breaking and it was still unconfirmed, but now they've confirmed it and it's not good news. So CBC is reporting, quote, union holding news conference as 2,500 Oshawa auto workers fear for their jobs. Uncertain how many of the 2,500 workers in Oshawa will lose jobs. Global staff cut to be about 15%. The union representing thousands of auto workers is vowing to fight back against General Motors' plan to close an Oshawa, Ontario plant in 2019 as part of the global restructuring plan. It's not clear how many of the 2,500 employees at the Oshawa assembly facility will lose their jobs under the sweeping strategy, which GM says aims to lower carbon emissions and prepare for a future of electric and autonomous vehicles. Unifor, the union representing the Oshawa auto workers, is holding a 2 p.m. conference you can watch live above. So that's less what the story is about today. I want to show the style difference between the two leaders of the Conservative parties in Canada, one being Maxime Bernier and one being Andrew Scheer. So both put out statements about this. Scheer's is on Twitter and Facebook, and Bernier's is just on Twitter. But first, I want to remind you, let's go back to 2009. And this is the Globe and Mail reporting. Canadian taxpayers lose $3.5 billion on bailout of auto firms. And I'll just read this. So this was printed originally April 7th, 2015, and updated May 14th, 2018. Quote, Canadian taxpayers will fall about $3.5 billion short of breaking even on the money the federal and Ontario governments invested in the bailouts of Chrysler Group LLC and General Motors Company in 2009. So we bought $3.5 billion of General Motors in 2009, and we bought a $4.5 billion pipeline that we can't build, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which was supposed to be started construction in 2018 and is still not under construction and has no date to begin construction. And Mr. Morneau has twisted himself into a pretzel trying to not answer that question. But again, I'm losing my way. Back to this. So the amount of billions in corporate welfare that GM has taken is quite a lot, not a small amount. And there are other tweets talking about it that Maxime Bernier has tweeted about, that give other totals that are quite a lot of money. But my point is, again, to focus on the leaders. So here's the stylistic difference. First, we'll look at Maxime Bernier, and then we'll look at Andrew Scheer. Maxime Bernier says, quote, 1, I don't know if GM's decision was inevitable or not. I do know that, 1, no point in giving billions to GM, Bombardier, etc. when they rationalized their operations away. 2, Liberal government was unable to get rid of U.S. tariffs on aluminum, steel that are increasing costs for the auto industry. 3, during USMCA negotiations, Liberals cared more about protecting dairy cartel than better deal for the auto industry. 4, we are less competitive with Trudeau's carbon tax and increased regulation. 5, the way to keep investment and jobs in Canada is not more handouts, but better business environment. Okay, so that's his statement, and Mr. Scheer's is, this is a devastating blow to thousands who have relied for decades on the GM plant in Oshawa. This closure represents the end of a long, proud tradition, there for over 100 years. My thoughts are with all of those who will be impacted. Here's my statement, and it's a link to Facebook, and I'll read the statement here as well. Today's news is a devastating blow to thousands of Southern Ontario families who have relied for decades on the General Motors assembly plant in Oshawa to provide a living. This closure represents the end of a long and proud tradition in Oshawa, which has been a reliable home to GM for over 100 years. My thoughts are with all those who will be impacted by this closure. Just last week, Justin Trudeau presented a fall economic update to Canadians, which painted a rosy picture of Canada's economy, despite mounting debt and deficits, rising inflation and interest rates, billions in lost investment, and a crisis in Canadian energy sector. Trudeau insists all is well. Only days later, we learn of this closure. Today, the Conservatives in Ottawa will call for an emergency debate in the House of Commons to press Liberals for a plan on how they will respond to the thousands of people out of work and how they will protect remaining manufacturing jobs in Ontario. Okay, so a couple of things. I think that fundamentally, stylistically, I like Maxime Bernier's response better. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, he lays out what he would do differently or the flaws in the plan, and talks about mistakes the Liberal government made specifically and gives examples, right? Liberal government was unable to get rid of tariffs on steel and aluminum, increasing the cost for the auto industry. It's a no-brainer. If the same product costs 20% less below the border at a different location, is it worth moving your company there? And it's not a matter of if it's worth it. It's a matter of how long do you pay the inflated costs to keep your operations in the more inefficient place to keep it, like the more expensive place. Canada is very, very expensive, especially for manufacturing. And you can see Maxime Bernier is responding to a Wall Street Journal, newspaper article today calling Canada one of the most expensive countries in the world to build cars. So stylistically, I think that Max wins on this, because when Andrew Scheer holds Mr. Trudeau to account in the House of Commons, Mr. Trudeau is going to just ignore him or not answer the question, or agree with him and say, what do you think we should do? And then adopt all of those things, but it'll just die in committee, right? It'll just be put into committee, and they'll have those standing committee conversations. And I've looked at a bunch of them. They talk about, well, they don't talk about nothing. Usually the Conservative MP holds the Liberal MP to account, and the Liberal MP looks at the speaker or the chair of the meeting, rolls his eyes or her eyes, and gives a nonsense word salad response. Mr. Morneau is a really good example in a video that I've done recently, where the words that he says and the questions being asked have they don't meet at all. It's like that Billy Madison scene at the end of the Billy Madison, where the guy says, we're all stupider for having listened to what you've just said. It's just like that. And yes, Bill Morneau looks like a Will Ferrell character. I've always thought that. I always thought it was maybe Will Ferrell just acting the whole time, and everybody's going to laugh and clap and say, oh my goodness, we were all worried that you were. So yes, I have preference for Mr. Bernier, because at least he's doing something a little bit differently. I think that if the Conservatives rallied the base, and there was some public pressure to answer a question, and I know that there is public pressure to answer a question. People talk about the fact that Justin Trudeau doesn't answer a question, but holding him to account in the House of Commons has not made Mr. Scheer a household name. Nobody's watching YouTube clips of him holding Mr. Trudeau to account, and the reason is because he's not speaking to the things that people want to hear. Mr. Bernier is saying, I know we shouldn't be giving billions of dollars to GM or Bombardier because they're just throwing it away, clearly. And saying that we're less competitive with the carbon tax and less competitive with increased regulation. So, it is definitely a stylistic choice. There are definitely benefits to Scheer's approach in that that's the usual way of solving these problems. But I don't think Trudeau is a usual prime minister, and I don't think this majority is a usual majority. They're arrogant, and they really, truly don't care that they're not answering questions. They will read from a piece of paper and then walk away from the cameras and the microphones. And I don't think they care or know the fool they're making of themselves when they do this, but they are, and it's resonating. Canadians see that the emperor is wearing no clothes. It is apparent that Trudeau has no idea what he's doing. He's killed the energy sector in Alberta. He's killing the car manufacturing heart of Ontario. And that's just for breakfast, right? We've still got a full year left. Maybe brunch. We've still got a full year left and a majority mandate. And he's going to sign away our sovereignty on December 10th for the Global Compact on Migration. I do a video about that too. So this is totally stylistic. This is definitely, I think both people, Mr. Scheer and Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Bernier, not Mr. Trudeau, are on the same page, but I think they're getting there in vastly different mechanisms and different vehicles. And me personally, well, I like Mr. Bernier. So thank you for watching. I appreciate your time, and check out the People's Party of Canada.ca. Have a wonderful afternoon.